All right, hi everyone. I'm Jeff Leslie. I direct the Housing Initiative Transactional Clinic. So I'll talk a little bit about this clinic and then in some general terms about the overall clinic program. So the housing clinic, like it says, it's a transactional clinic, and it tries to address the shortage of decent affordable housing in Chicago. Research has shown over and over again that if you don't have decent, stable housing, it's very difficult to make progress in all the other areas of life that may be challenging for you. In our work, we also interact with, sorry, I don't know why it says on some kind of autoplay. Forget that. We also interact with all the structural forces that are behind this shortage of affordable housing and work with clients in trying to address those. So here's a book recommendation. If you haven't seen this one yet, this is a book that's looking at why we see concentrations of homeless people only in certain kinds of places. And it turns out it doesn't have much to do with what you might think, indicia of poverty rates or drug abuse or other kinds of social problems, but it's really driven by the availability of housing and housing that is affordable to low-income people. So let me talk a little bit about this project. Again, our clinic works on the development of affordable housing, new affordable housing units. We represent nonprofit organizations on all kinds of real estate projects, large and small. This is one of the larger ones. Much of our work is done through joint ventures with for-profit developers. So this one in particular is on the north side. It's on the footprint of the old Cabrini Green public housing high-rises. Starting in the early 2000s, the CHA and housing authorities across the country started tearing down the old public housing high-rises and building new mixed income developments. So our client in this one is a nonprofit that was formed by the Public Housing Tenant Association, elected tenant representatives for public housing, who through some litigation with one of our sister agencies had won the right in court to be part of the redevelopment at Cabrini Green. So this project, let's see what to say about it. The housing authority controlled the land. They contributed the land to this joint venture that our client was part of. We worked alongside other counsel on the land acquisition, which in this case turned out to be not truly an acquisition, but instead a long-term ground lease. For policy reasons, the housing authority wanted to hold on to the land long-term. So we had this kind of complicated ground lease and then clients building properties on top of it. We worked on those ground lease contracts and all of the contracts for the financing of these projects, all of the contracts for the design work, for the construction work, for the property management, for the provision of social services. All of those contracts ran through our shop, and we worked on them and negotiated them with the lens of our client's particular perspective representing the public housing tenants. It turns out that affordable housing developments like this, like by definition, need a lot of public subsidy. And the public subsidy cannot be ignored in structuring the transaction, figuring out how it works. So we've got involved in this, we've got our two developers, our client, and then a for-profit co-partner. We started off with three. One was replaced a few years into the project. Then that one went bankrupt. We had to work through that bankruptcy, figure out what that meant for the joint venture. Sometime along 2010, there was a default driven by the Great Recession. Couldn't sell the townhomes that were planned for the project. There was a workout of the construction loan through that process. So these are long-term projects that go in phases over a long period of time and represent some of the most complex affordable housing transactions in the country. So for this one, in addition to our two co-developers, we had a series of investors who are putting a lot of dollars into development in return for federal tax benefits for interest deductions, depreciation deductions, and low-income housing tax credits. And we worked on the partnership agreements that would take all of those inputs and parcel them out appropriately amongst the partners so that the investors are getting the tax benefits that they need, so that our co-developer and our client has control over the joint venture and can make decisions about the design and construction of the development. And so that we're able to again, take in all the multiple levels of financing that are needed to put a project like this together. So we represent the nonprofit organizations in these kinds of ventures. I put a few of them on this slide here. Chicago is a rich city for nonprofit activity. There's a lot of work like this going on, and we have over the years built up a very good portfolio of clients who are doing these kinds of deals. And in doing it, we're working with very sophisticated counterparties. So we're dealing with nonprofit, for-profit lenders, investor groups. We're working with co-counsel from some of the leading civil rights organizations around town, and some of the law firms, large and small, that do this kind of work. I think one of the real benefits of working in the clinic is students get exposure to a sector of the private bar that they may not know about. The Affordable Housing and Community Development Law Forum at the ABA is a collection of lawyers, many of whom work in small boutique firms, were moved over from big law to bring their practices into this setting. And I think you can think of it as sort of public interest adjacent private lawyering. So a project like the one we just looked at does generate attorney's fees. They're very complex projects to put together. There is a section of the private bar that works on these kinds of tax-advantaged investments. And the lawyers, many of whom are graduates, who work in this sector find a lot of satisfaction in the complexity of the work. They're paid well. And at the end of the day, they're developing a product, affordable housing for low-income people that they can feel good about and be proud of. So within our transactions, we work a lot on these kind of structuring questions of how to bring all of these parties together for a complex project. So we work with a lot of partnership agreements, entity formation. And then on the development side, we work on all phases from sort of pre-development work, negotiation phase, through the negotiation and drafting of all the contracts, and then up into a real estate closing where money changes hands, land is transferred. There's a lot of information that needs to be brought to the table and completed and signed up. So negotiation is a big part of what our clinic does. As I mentioned, we're frequently negotiating on behalf of smaller nonprofits that are joint venturing with large companies. So issues about control loom large. And issues about the flow of funds and how we divide up economic benefits are super important. And you might think that our kinds of clients get rolled over because we're working with big developers that have the technical expertise, they can sign guarantees and have the balance sheet to support it. So surely they must just be dictating terms. But it turns out that the powerful right arm of community development is those longstanding community connections, connections to City Department of Housing, to aldermen, to the longstanding issues around affordable housing that are in people's neighborhoods that our clients have been working on for a very long time. And our clients, and we on behalf of our clients, are very ambitious within these joint ventures. And we're able to negotiate arrangements that give our clients a lot of control, a lot of input into the development, while also giving them a fair return economically from the developer fees and the cash flow. And then at the end of the day, after all that negotiation, contract work, the joyous occasion, hopefully a joyous occasion of a closing where it all comes to fruition, and then the project starts to be built and occupied, and we've developed then, by this point, hundreds of units across the city of Chicago for low-income people. So just a word about, this is true for the Housing Initiative Clinic, but I think for all of our clinics, that what we're really trying to do here is teach transferable skills. Most of the students in my clinic are not going to go into community development, and that's fine. Really what we're hoping students will get out of this is experience in developing their professional skills and their professional identities. So we spent a lot of time in class talking about negotiation strategy, the importance of planning, ethics issues that come up in our work, And then reflection. So think about like what went well, what we just worked on, what could we have done better? How does it affect your own career, your aspirations for yourself as an attorney? Like that's all part and parcel of what we're talking about, not just in my clinic, but across all the clinics. All right, and there's some contact information for you.